Now we're actually going to compute a correlation. There's an example in your textbook on pages 146 to 148. I'm doing a different example so that you can look at the one in your book, but you'll also have one that I've done out in front of you, or kind of in front of you. And so let's say, for example, you were asked to look at the quality of a practicum. And one of the things you were examining was, and you thought that the longer individuals are in their internship or their practicum, the less anxiety they would feel with their practicum. So again, they're going into these clinical settings and they're having to deal with clinical patients. And perhaps you believe that at the onset there might be some anxiety, but as they spend more and more time in this role and they become more comfortable with this role, they would experience less anxiety in the practicum setting. And so to examine this, you collect 10 participants who are presently working on their practicum, and you give them a survey, and in the survey you look at anxiety during their practicum, and you also assess how long or how many months per se they've been working on the practicum. So you have two variables. You have the months on the practicum, and we're going to call months X. That's going to be our variable X. And then you also have their anxiety, and that's going to be Y. That's our variable Y. And just, we have 10 participants, so we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay? And so because we have 10 participants, N equals 10. 10 individuals participating. And so maybe your first participant has only been doing the practicum for 1 month, and they scored a 4 on the anxiety scale. We're going to do a 1 through 5 anxiety scale, and just to make life easy for computation, we're going to give them all whole numbers. This usually doesn't happen in real life. You usually get things like 4.2 and 4.8, and it makes the math a little harder, but just for ease of computation, we'll keep it nice and simple. Your second participant has also only been doing practicum for 1 month, and they also got a 4 on the anxiety scale. Your third participant has been doing it for 3 months. They got a 3 on the anxiety scale. Your fourth participant has been doing it for 2 months and got a 4 on the anxiety scale. Your fifth participant has been in the practicum for 8 months and received a 5 on the anxiety scale. Your sixth participant has been there for 7 months, and they received a 2 on the anxiety scale. Your seventh participant has been in it for 9 months and received a 1 on the anxiety scale. Your eighth participant has been in for 10 months and received a 2 on the anxiety scale. Your ninth participant was in for 5 months and received a 3 on the anxiety scale. And your last participant also was in for 5 months and received a 2 on the anxiety scale. Now, the equation is quite complicated to look at, but it's actually quite simple to compute. You're going to need, let me go ahead and write the massive equation over here. A correlation equals the sum of xy minus the sum of x times the sum of y over n over the square root of, parentheses, sum of x squared, oops, sorry, we don't want to end the parentheses just yet, sorry about that, minus sum of x squared over n. Now we're going to multiply that expression with sum of y squared minus sum of y squared over n, and that expression. Okay, so sorry about that. But it looks very cumbersome, but it's really not that difficult. You need 3 extra columns over here. You need an x squared column, you need a y squared column, and you need an xy column. Okay? And so basically for each of your x values, you're going to square them all. 1 squared is 1, 1 squared is 1, 3 squared is 9, 2 squared is 4, 8 squared is 64, 7 squared is 49, 9 squared is 81, 10 squared is 100, 5 squared is 25, and 5 squared is 25. Okay? You're going to have a y squared column, and you're going to take your y's, each y, and square them. 4 squared is 16, 16, 3 squared is 9, 4 squared is 16, 5 squared is 25, 2 squared is 4, 1 squared is 1, 2 squared is 4, 3 squared is 9, and 2 squared is 4. Okay? And you're also going to have an xy column. Be careful with this. You want to make sure you're multiplying x with y, not these x squared and y squared. So you're going to go 1 times 4 is 4. 1 times 4 is 4. 3 times 3 is 9. 2 times 4 is 8. 8 times 5 is 40. I don't know if I'm keeping my columns very nice, but 7 times 2 is 14. 9 times 1 is 9. 10 times 2 is 20. 5 times 3 is 15. And 5 times 2 is 10. Okay? So you've got all of your columns, but now you need to sum them all. Okay? So here you've got sum of x equals, and if you add all of these up, you should come up with 51. Okay? Here we've got sum of x squared. Remember, we squared each x first and then summed them. If you sum all these up, you'll come up with 359. Sum of y, if you add this column up, you'll come up to 30. Sum of y squared, remember we squared each value of y first, now we're going to sum them, is 104. So again, this is adding these all up. You come up with 104. And then our sum of xy is summing all of these up. You come up with 133. Okay? Now you actually have all the information to plug into that massive equation. But if you want to save yourself one more step, you could square sum of x, because this would be sum of x. You've summed them first, then we square it. So if you go 51 on your calculators and you go 51 squared, you should come up with, I'll tell you in a second, 2601. Okay, same thing here. Sum of y, we summed them first and squared it. Okay, so we've summed them first. Sum of y is 30, and now we're going to square 30. 30 times 30 is 900. Okay, now we have every value we'd need to plug into this equation. Okay, so we're just going to take it nice and slow and make sure we plug them in the right place. Sum of xy is 133 minus sum of x is down here, 51. Sum of y is right there, is 30. Over, and remember n equals 10. There were 10 participants. And we're going to put that over the square root of, okay. Now we have sum of x squared, okay. That's this value here. We're squaring our x's first, then summing them. So 359 minus, now we've got sum of x in parentheses, so we summed the x's first and then squared that value. Okay, so that's 2601 over 10 times sum of y squared, which is right over here, 104, minus sum of y, where we summed them all first, then square that value, is going to be 900, over, again, n is 10. Okay, so we just plug in the numbers we've already computed from over here. Okay, and then if we do that out, we'll come up with 133 minus, and if you do this out, 51 times 30, and then divide it by 10, you'll come up with 153. Okay, I take a little longer to do the bottom expression. So it's 359 minus 2601 over 10 is going to be 260.1. Okay, and the same thing over here, 104 minus 900 divided by 10 is 90. Okay, now our top expression, don't be surprised, this is going to be a negative 20. Remember, we can have negative correlations, and that's what we're computing here. Okay, over the square root of 359 minus 260.1 is 98.9. And I did that on the calculator. And then I go 104 minus 90, that is 14. Okay, so that's going to equal negative 20 over, so I just put this in my calculator, 98.9 times 14, and then don't forget to root it. Okay, oftentimes people forget that step and it messes them up. So make sure you root it, and you should come up with 37.21. Make my French 7, okay? And then if you go negative 20 divided by 37.21, you should come up, and some of this is rounding to 2 decimal points. This is definitely rounding to 2 decimal points. You come up with R equals negative 0.54. So our correlation is negative 0.54. Now before I close off this little segment, let's see what it looks like. Okay, so remember on my previous little clip, I showed you what a correlation looks like when we plot it. Well, let's plot this one. Let's put months down here, and we'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I should have probably planned that out a little bit better. 10. And then we had a 5-point anxiety scale. So I'll spread that out a little more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Anxiety. And let's plot each of our participants and see how it looks. 1 month for anxiety. So 1 month up to 4 on anxiety. We had another person 1 month for an anxiety, so I'm just going to kind of put them right there too. We had 3 months, 3 on anxiety, so I'm going 3 months, 3 on anxiety. We had 2 months with a 4 on anxiety, 2 months, 4 on anxiety. Okay. 8 months of 5 on anxiety, so we're going to go 8 up to 5. Now that kind of goes against that negative correlation, doesn't it? But sometimes you have that. Okay. 7 months, a 2 on anxiety. 9 months, a 1 on anxiety. 10 months, a 2 on anxiety. Put that up there. 5 months, a 3 on anxiety. And 5 months, a 2 on anxiety. Okay? And so you have this outlier out here, which means this person that's not kind of fitting into the other, but if you put kind of a line through that, it does look kind of like a negative correlation, and that's kind of what you would expect to see. It's not a perfect negative 1.0, so you have plenty of dots falling off this line of prediction, but there's definitely an inverse trend between months and anxiety, so a negative correlation of 0.54, and that's how you compute a correlation.